Well, good morning. Hey, it's official. I'm a grandpa. We had a baby dedication, two baby dedications, and I thought, hey, it's a good time to let you know as well. So I'm a proud grandpa. Hallie Mae Bedard was born on August 7th, and she is gorgeous. So if you're interested, you want to see pictures, I got plenty. I would love to show them to you. Before I begin, just want to say, if you're stuck at work, if you're stuck in your position and you're wondering, how do I get beyond this? How do I move forward? We have a course that actually has been very instrumental in helping some of our people. It's called Develop the Leader in You. And it helps people to get unstuck in their work and to actually be able to bring better work to their work. So I just invite you to consider that. It's one of the classes we offer. Now, I am not a Star Trek or Star Wars fan. I'm not a big sci-fi kind of guy. How's that for rhyming? However, Star Wars, when it came out, I was 7 years old, and I remember going to see it, and it had an impact on me. George Lucas was a genius in regards to the technology back then, but there was one scene in the original movie, the first movie, which it's kind of weird. It's actually number 4, but it was the first one that came out. And how many of you remember that gold robot? What's his name? C-3PO, good. And how many of you remember those white guys with big masks and they would shoot people? Stormtroopers, good. And how many of you remember the big hairy guy? Chewbacca, right. Okay, here's a real skill testing question. What kind of species was Chewbacca? You got it. Well, we have some Star Wars fans in the house today. I'm not one of them necessarily, I just remember this. But there was one scene in the movie that just really impacted me. And do you remember when C-3PO, he got shot by some stormtroopers and he went into pieces. His robotic arms went one way, his legs went another, his torso went another. His head was actually decapitated. And Chewbacca, who happened to be his very good friend, went looking for him. And he found him. He was in the trash system, ready to be incinerated. And so he collected the parts, and he brought them, and all alone, you see Chewbacca, and he's beginning to putting the pieces back together for his friend, C-3PO. It's very touching, actually. This big, strong is doing this to his friend. He's helping his friend out. It's very powerful. You know, even men of steel sometimes need a friend to help put them back together once in a while. No matter how strong you think you are, you need friends. You need community. How many of you are so thankful that we're able to gather once again, sitting shoulder to shoulder with one another? This is what God intended, and so I'm so glad we can do this. But you know, Jesus himself was also not a man of steel. He was not one who could just live and exist without friends. As a matter of fact, he had a number of friends. Friendships mattered a lot to him. When you look at the Gospels, you're going to see that the crowds, they often tried to use Jesus. Hey, I want a miracle. Hey, give me this. Hey, give me that. The religious people, they tried to trap Jesus and try to kill Jesus ultimately. His own brothers tried to distract him from his mission. His own mother tried to stop him when she thought he was losing his mind. Judas Iscariot, one of his own 12 closest friends, tried to control Jesus and make things go his way. But only Jesus' life group supported him. You heard me. Jesus was in a life group. See, a life group doesn't have to be something that is part of Christian Life Assembly or another established church. It's a gathering of friends that come together, and they do life together as a group. And Jesus had a life group. As a matter of fact, some of you are thinking the 12 disciples. You would be right, but there were more than them. There was also Mary and Martha and Lazarus, to name only a few. And when you look at the Gospels, you're going to see that only Martha is she's the only person in the Gospels that we ever see her saying to Jesus, make yourself at home. And she really meant it. Oh, Jesus was invited into a lot of homes, but sometimes there was ulterior motives. Sometimes they wanted stuff. Sometimes they wanted miracles. Sometimes they just wanted to trap him. And yet this home, Martha's home, was the only one where she felt safe. You know, we all need a few Marthas in our life, don't we? Where there's no strings attached. It's just friendships. It's loving one another. It's caring for one another. It's doing life together. We all need a few Marthas. If you have your Bible, Luke chapter 10, verse 38 to 40, introduce us to Jesus and his life group. And I want for you to see this. Luke 10, verses 38 to 40 say this: As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Not just to him, but to the 12 disciples as well. That's what's inferred. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. She also had a brother. Although it doesn't say it in this passage, it tells us in John chapter 11. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And we're not going to go into the dirt and into the weeds of what happened in this relationship. The altercation that happened between Martha and Mary, and Jesus had to be the referee of it. All I'm going to say is that in these three verses, we see three powerful representations of what healthy life groups are about. And so you might say, I'm not a part of a life group. Yeah, you are. You are. If you have Christian friends, you are a part of a life group. Now, how functional it is or how healthy it is, that's something maybe to look at. We've begun this series, Welcome Home, and many of you have come home. Many of you have filled in these seats, and we've noticed it, and we're thrilled. Pastor Derrick, I know this has been such an encouraging fall for him, and I know that as other pastors, we feel the same way. We love the fact that these seats are being filled. So make yourself at home at CLA once again. And those of you who are new, welcome and make yourself at home. But this morning, I want to also make an invitation known to you. Make yourself at home in our life groups. You may not realize it, but we have a number of them. Back in Edmonton, in my previous setting, where I oversaw life groups as well, there was a couple named Dave and Kimberly. Dave and Kimberly became Christians. They became followers of Jesus through the Alpha course. It's a powerful course. But where they really gained traction in their spiritual development was in their life group. I loved watching them. They dove right in. Their life group came around them. There was no judgment. There was no pointing of fingers, the fact that they weren't married when they first joined, and then God began to work on them. Not them speaking to them, but the Holy Spirit speaking to them. They wanted to make that right. They got married. It was beautiful to watch the growth and the development of Dave and Kimberly. One day, they came after church, after they had come to church as a family, they returned home. They walked into the house and literally stepped inside the house, and just like that, Dave died of a heart attack. Kimberly did what every woman would do in that moment. She called 911. And I'll tell you this, Kimberly did what every woman in a healthy life group would do in that moment. She called one of her life group leaders. And almost the same time that the ambulance arrived, there on the doorstep was their life group leader. The life group was mobilized without question. People came in shifts. They made sure she and the children were not alone. They brought in meals. They cut the lawn. They shoveled the snow when it came to wintertime. They never gave up on this family that had just been minimized. It was a powerful experience for this life group to have to walk through, but what a privilege it was, and what a blessing it was to Kimberly. They not only organized the funeral, they ran the funeral. They continued to care for months after the dust literally settled on the casket. The life group didn't. Kimberly's life group continued. And Kimberly made it known that without her life group, she probably wouldn't have made it through. It was such a huge loss. You see, life groups provide lifelines to us. And once again, you might say, I'm not in a life group. I would like to say, yet, because you're missing out. But you are in life groups. When you have friendships with those who know Jesus and you walk with them, God has blessed you with those friendships. As we look at the Gospels, we see that there are three life marks of healthy life groups, and especially in this passage in Luke. First of all, a healthy life group, whether it's an established one at CLA or one that you have naturally in your friendships, your doors are always open. That's what a healthy life group does. The doors are always open, no questions asked. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, it tells us, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Without question, Jesus, anytime you're coming through, anytime you're on your way into or out of Jerusalem, we're just 5 miles away. You stay with us. Don't stay at that Holiday Inn in Jerusalem. Stay with us. We love having you. That's what a healthy life group does. There's always room for one more, or in the case of Martha, she made room for 13. How'd you like that one? Well, Les Holcroft, he said this, that during his last few months on earth, which of course for Jesus would have been the hardest few months of his life, Jesus appears to have made his home with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in the village of Bethany near Jerusalem. He appears to have made this his home away from home. Matthew chapter 21, verse 17 even goes on, and it says this. It says that as Jesus left them and he went to the city of Bethany, where he spent the night. He didn't just darken the door like a Bible study, but he actually stayed there. He lived with them. He stayed with them whenever he was in town. When we returned to Edmonton, we could stay in some hotels. We know the city. We used to live there. We could stay in some nice places. We could do some, touristy sorts of things. But we have open invitations, and I would suggest that we actually have some pretty strong, opinionated life group members that say, don't you dare stay in a hotel. You stay with us. And so when we go, that's where we stay. This summer, as our granddaughter was being born, we went to Nanaimo. We spent some time with our son and daughter-in-law. But guess what? We needed to give them their space. They were coming home with a baby. There had to be some healing happening. And so, to make things easier for them, we stayed with some friends that we've stayed with before. Guess what? They live in Nanuce, but they're from our life group in Edmonton. Years later, those bonds are still tight. You know it's a healthy life group when your home, or when their home becomes your home away from home. There was a couple when I was lead pastoring on the island, Dave and Jan. They opened their home to our life group. We literally went there and we met there regularly. We had our studies together, prayer times together. We shared life together. We had meals together. We lived life together in this life group at Dave and Jan's place. But those are not the memories that impacted me the most. As I think back to Dave and Jan, what impacted me the most was, more often than not, Dave would give me a call and say, Pastor Rob, Jan and I would like you to come, you and Lorinda, for supper again. Are you sure? We were just there. See, they couldn't leave. They couldn't come to our place because they took care of some adult children, so to speak. Some children that were really needing a lot of assistance. So they couldn't leave the home. And so Dave and Jan always invited us in. And every time we would go there, it was literally like a decompression chamber. I'd walk into their home. And it wasn't because we spent our times there studying the Bible and praying together and that it had just become so comfortable. It's because of Dave and Jan. We would sit on their couch, or we would be sitting at their kitchen table, and I would feel this melting away of the stress of the week. And I would feel so rejuvenated by the end of the evening. Lorinda and I would talk, and we would say, isn't it awesome? Isn't it different to be able to go to a home where we're not the pastors, we're the friends. We're the brother and the sister to this couple. I thank God for Dave and Jan. We all need some Dave and Jans in our life, don't we? The second life mark is that in healthy life groups, whether established at CLA or in your own circle of friends, the floor always belongs to Jesus. It's not my opinion that matters. It's not yours that matters at the end of the conversation or even the debate. It's what Jesus says. And in this passage, it clearly tells us that Martha had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. Now, in this culture, women were not supposed to sit at the feet of rabbis. But I love the fact that Jesus elevated the status of women and said, she's welcome to stay. As a matter of fact, she's doing the right thing, the better thing. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. He claimed to be a Christian, and I'm not suggesting he isn't, but he claimed also to not believe much of what the Bible said. And he literally took a sharp instrument and cut out the verses of the Bible that he didn't believe were plausible. He removed the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now we know what the Apostle Paul says when we do that. That nullifies our entire faith. But Jefferson did that. And he also cut out a number of Jesus' teachings. With all due respect to Thomas Jefferson, what he says doesn't matter. What he thinks doesn't matter as much as what Jesus says and thinks. And so a healthy life group or a healthy circle of friendships is where the floor always belongs to Jesus. He always gets the last word. It always comes back to him and to what he says in his scriptures. There's an author, Royal Raj S. What an interesting name. He says this: feed on the word, have a listening ear, and an obeying heart. That should be our posture. When we sit at the feet of Jesus, feed on that word. Listen to that word. And obey that word. It will make a life of difference for us. You know, a life group is healthy when Jesus has the floor, when he's the one that we all listen to. I have a very good friend. I don't want to say we grew up together, but we met in Bible college, the first days of Bible college. Her name is Tina. And I went to Bible college in Ontario, and she was from Ontario as well as I. And we lost touch of each other over some time, but then we reconnected. And of course, she met Lorinda. She loves Lorinda. Lorinda's like a best friend to her. But Tina, about 10 years ago, began to battle with some health issues, major health issues. Cost her her job, obviously her health. Cost her her job. She lost her apartment. She even had to give up her car. It was so bad, her circumstances, she had to actually go back home. Now, for some of you, you'd say, well, that would be the right natural place for her to go, but not in this situation. Her home was toxic. Not her mom, but her dad. Was actually abusive physically. It's not a good situation for her. When I caught wind that she was going back, we mobilized our life group. You know, Dave and Jan's life group? Our life group began to pray for her. We prayed for Tina regularly. God protect her. God help her. God provide for her. God heal her. We prayed. And then around Christmas time, without Lorinda and I initiating it, my life group who had prayed for Tina felt that they loved and knew Tina personally, said, why don't we collect money and give money to Tina this Christmas? Who does that? And so they did, and we sent it off. She called us just after Christmas. The abuse began again. And we said to her, Tina, you got to get out of there. As a matter of fact, we want you to hop on a plane, come to BC and join us. Leave Ontario, not because it's a bad place, but because this is not a good situation for you. Come, live with us for as long as it takes till you get your feet on the ground. She took the money that the life group had given her. She bought a one-way ticket to BC. She still lives on the island. I wish I could tell you that she lived happily ever after. 2 years ago, Tina had a stroke. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Again, she lost her job. And once again, my life group began to pray. My life group in Abbotsford began to lift her up before the Lord. We began to ask God, would you please show mercy? Would you please bring healing? Would you please help her through this situation, this challenging time? She had brain surgery, and right after the brain surgery, she rolled in a wheelchair onto a BC ferry and came over to Vancouver. She had no one to care for her, no family on that side. But she knew that we were here. She stayed with us for about a month while she recuperated, and then she returned home because she had doctor's appointments and so on. But I tell you this story because, once again, a life group breathes life into the soul of people who need it most. There was a dear woman in my life group who prayed for Tina daily. Tina got into her heart. And when Tina arrived in our home, she arrived on our doorstep, this friend from our life group, with a bouquet of flowers. She came in and she said, "I'm so sorry you're walking through this. We're praying for you." Tina told me 2 weeks ago, it was her 10th anniversary of being on the island. A lot of water under that bridge, boy. And a lot of it was white water. And it still is. But she said to me, she said, "That lady from your life group never met me before. Those flowers and that gesture of love meant the world to me." You know, we have a number of Marthas in this church. We have a number of wonderful people who know how to express the love of Jesus to others. That's what a healthy life group is about. The third life mark, just quickly here, is that everyone is ready to serve. Everyone's ready and willing to serve. If there's a need, they step up, they meet the need. Verse 40 says, "But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made," and certainly there had to be some preparations made, and she was willing to serve. I'll leave it at that. The argument came over that issue, but thank God for people like Martha who are willing to get their hands dirty, roll up their sleeves and do something. Just this week, my life group in Abbotsford launched again, and Tuesday evening was our first gathering. Tuesday morning. We have a woman in our life group. She's Mexican, and she was going to prepare an authentic Mexican fiesta, a full meal with all the goodies. We were excited about this. I don't know if you like Mexican food, but I do. And this woman from our life group was going to do this all by herself, and we were just going to then contribute money and pay for the ingredients and pay for the food and just enjoy our first gathering as a life group. We love getting together. We love gathering together and eating together. But this woman, this Mexican woman in our life group, received the news that at 12:45 there was a death in her family. She had to step away. So all of a sudden we're without our evening plans. Well, wouldn't you know, I wasn't surprised. We have another wonderful woman in our life group who said, "I can help." She spent the day running around, getting all the food, getting all of it prepared, bringing it over to our place, and we had a marvelous Mexican fiesta. Thankfully, because someone was willing to step up and serve. So life groups, a wonderful, wonderful place. I want to show you a video. I want you to see that life groups can truly change lives. Watch this video with me.
Hi, my name's Colin. I'm a regular guy, 40 years old, got a wife, a couple kids, 3 kids. I've been coming to CLA for about 11 years. I grew up going to church every Sunday with my mom and my brothers and sister. My mom told me that when I became an adult, I could make my own decisions. So at 18, I decided, I'm not gonna go to church anymore. And I fell away from God, and things were really bad. I ended up having a heart attack when I was 24, and really just living my life down to, sort of the bottom level. If you'd asked me back then if I was a Christian, I probably would have said no. And then one sunny afternoon, I met my wife at a barbecue. And so I remember she asked me to come to church, and I was smitten. I said, yeah, I'm gonna do anything I can to spend more time with this girl. At the time I was a bartender, so after a long night, Saturday night, and showed up, and Pastor Brent Canlon was giving a message, and for the life of me, I don't remember what he was talking about. But I remember it ripped through me. And I could tell at that moment that I had found a place I was supposed to be. It's been a journey. Even where I am, I mean, it's not like you come to church and recommit your life and all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory. But my wife and I would just come here Sunday morning, we didn't have kids at the time, so we'd be 11 o'clockers, we'd sleep in, go sit up on the top balcony, walk in, maybe say hi to a few people. And then service was over and, we'd beelined out the door. It was great, the messages were great, the worship was great, we felt connected with ourselves, but we didn't feel connected with the church. With a church this size, it was hard to do if you're just, two regular people. And so a couple months into us being married, we requested to be put in touch with a life group. Met on our first night, probably 10 or 12 married couples around the same age as us who had young kids, and we were expecting our first at the time. And all of a sudden, church wasn't just we show up and worship, church was now we have a family. And that really changed my wife and I's idea of church. And about 4 or 5 years later, Kevin and Julia stepped down as life group leaders, and they asked if we wanted to take over. And so my wife and I thought about it, and we, felt, yeah, this is a good calling for us. During that time, around 2019, I hit a very low point for myself. A lot of people didn't know it. I put on a very good front for people, but I was very depressed. I didn't want to do anything, didn't want to lead life group. I'd find any reason at all to not go out. I'd come home from work and close my door and cry in the darkness. I Googled ways how to kill myself that would be the least impactful or hurting my family. I had multiple suicide notes written in case something was going to happen. And I didn't know what to do. And I fell away from God again. I was part of the prayer team, the prayer ministry team. And when I stepped back, I lost joy because those things brought me great joy of being able to help other people, to pray over people, to, hopefully see change in their own lives, to know that they're not alone. But yet I wouldn't tell anybody that I was feeling alone. And then one night at life group, and in our life group as our men's night, we meet in my garage. And one night I just told everyone where I was, and I broke down. And even then, when people said, "Oh, can I pray for you? Can we pray for you right now? Can we lay hands on you?" I was like, "No, I don't want that." Some people had told me that they were praying for me, just every day. "Hey, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you." And I just would look at them and say, "Yeah, thanks," right? That's great. Didn't really think it was going to do anything. Now I was seeing a counselor, and every night he'd make me fill out this form about how I was and how I was doing. And every time I'd see him, it was the same story. I'd rather not be here, rather not be alive. Be easier for my family if I wasn't. I told my mom that I was feeling down, and she's like, "Oh, what's wrong?" She just thought it was just a daily thing. And I said, "No, Mom, this is serious. I'm in a place where I want to hurt myself." And so my mom started praying for me. And then all of a sudden I would start getting messages from people on Facebook or text messages, "Hey, we're praying for you." Didn't think anything would come of it. I stopped praying myself, stopped reading my Bible. And then one day in May 2020, I guess, I woke up and something changed. And I wasn't sure what it was. Maybe I just had a good sleep, and 24 hours went by and it was the same thing. Say, okay, this is different. Then 24 hours went by and the same thing. And I was like, what is going on? This is something that shouldn't just happen. So I went to see my counselor, just like our normal weekly visit, and he made me fill out the form. And one of the questions was always on the last week, how many days have you thought about killing yourself? And usually you'd be 5 or 6. And this time I remember, I so vividly remember circling 0. And I handed it in to him, and he said, "Is this a joke?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, what's going on?" I said, I have no idea. And I had no other explanation for him except for the fact that there have been people praying for me. I don't know what's changed. I haven't changed. All I know is that people have been praying for me. The difference that made in my life of knowing that people were praying for me, that it wasn't just, I'm here alone. knowing that God, even though I turned my back away, knowing that God didn't do that for me. He kept fighting for me. He kept putting people in my way to stand for me. It saved me. You know, I don't know how many people in this church were praying for me. How many people around the Lower Mainland were praying for me based on other things. How many people my mom told or my sister told. And although I didn't want them to put hands on me and pray for me, they did it in their own way anyways. I'm back to serving. I serve in the cafe now, you know, once a month or when I can help, and I find so much joy in doing that, right? I'm back to a place where I find joy in helping people again. Yeah, I look back after all of it, and if it wasn't for me joining that life group, I didn't have those people around me, I probably wouldn't be here today. Yeah, I mean, if you're out there, and sort of like how my wife and I were at the beginning, where we didn't know anybody in the church, we were happy to come, and we felt, you know, we were getting fed but needed more, join a life group. It's the best way to get connected, and it's the best way to feel whole in church.
Amen. That's what Jesus can do through you. That's what Jesus wants to do through you in the lives of others. As Colin said, join a life group. Don't do it for my sake. Do it for yours. You might say, I don't need people right now, but when you do, who's going to be there to put the pieces back together? Join a life group.